Hava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Balabha Girivardhari Gopijana Balabha Girivardhari Yashodhanandana Rajajana Ranjana Yashodhanandana Rajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Sri Radha Madhava Ki Jai Pantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Go Premanande Hari Hari Bo Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashnaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Shaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvise Susanivadi Paschati Rastaine Panchakalpaturubhyascha Kripasindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So it's time for a joke. So in 1966 in New York, they would eat this cereal made from farina. But the day before on Sunday, they made lots of rasgullas, which are curd rolled into balls, soaked in sugar water, if you've never had them. And they're deliciously sweet. And so the devotees would take those leftover gulab jamans, rasgullas, and put them in their cereal. And they really enjoyed that. But one devotee, Kirtanananda, he was on the austere side. So he thought this was too much indulgence and sense gratification. So he made a rule that you could only have 2 in your cereal. Devotees weren't happy with that. And they were young. They didn't know. So they went to Prabhupada and said, Prabhupada, Kirtananda says we can only put 2 rasgullas in our cereal. We want more. So Prabhupada, as the transcendental judge and like the funny, witty, sarcastic grandfather said, well, everybody can have as many rasgullas as they want, but Kirtananda can only have 2. So I've been reading a book. I don't know if you've seen this book. This book is interviews with all of Srila Prabhupada's female disciples. Just short interviews. And when you read the experiences devotees have, you inevitably run into stories about Prabhupada's wit, his affection, his humanness, sometimes sarcasm, sometimes anger, chastisement, all human emotions manifested in Prabhupada. And it's nice to read these books because it's hard for you, if you've never met Prabhupada, to understand him 360 degrees unless you read these books and learn about how he dealt with devotees and reacted and so forth. And there are stories where I was just reading a story where one woman was asked to remove her kid from class, and when she started to leave, either Prabhupada asked why, or Prabhupada said, no, you don't have to leave, even though maybe there was a disturbance or something. So how how we may think Prabhupada would react is not always how he reacted. Prabhupada had a very soft spot for children. And so I thought that story was, indicative of Prabhupada's wit. And I just read a really funny story. Sometimes Prabhupada would give nicknames to devotees. I think one devotee was very wild, so he called her the wild one, something like that. Where's the wild one? So he had this combination of being the guru, authority, strict disciplinarian, at the same time kind of like the grandfather who was funny and, you could say, eternally forgiving, like this combination of opposites. Anyway, before we begin today's class, we're going to finish up with the topic of spiritual bypassing. I wanted to read an amazing story. This is one of the most amazing stories I've ever read. And it's going to have deep impact. It'll have deep impact on all of us. And I read it this morning and I marked it because I thought you should hear this if you haven't. And if you have, then this will be a reminder of something quite amazing. So I have to give some background info on this story. Maybe most of you know, and Giriraj Swami has written a book. I think it's called Let There Be a Temple. That may be the name. About the story of the development of juhu. And I unfortunately haven't read the book yet, but everyone who's read it said it's beyond amazing. And even people who don't read such books, are not fond of it, told me, you should read this book. It's incredible. But to make a long story short, the man who sold us, we have a temple in a place called Juhu. It's a suburb of Mumbai, which at the time was very remote suburb, but now, not even now, but 30 years ago, not 40. After the temple was built, shortly thereafter, it developed, and a lot of the Bollywood stars lived there. Quite a elite area. There's a lot of hotels, nice beach. So this man's plan was that he would sell the property with the agreement that if we didn't get all the proper permits to build, then we would have to forfeit the deposit. And he had done that already with two people. And so Prabhupada buying was the third person he was trying to do that with. I don't think Prabhupada was aware of it at the time, or perhaps he was, but the law in India is if you build a temple or a place or a structure for the deities, you can't be removed from a property. Once the deities are there, it's like the deity's property, it's theirs, can't be removed. So that was the plan. So at some point we found out that this man had bribed the police, so they would never give us permission. So if we couldn't get permission, couldn't build, and therefore we would have to renege on the contract and lose the deposit, which was $50,000. In 1976, $50,000 was closer maybe to 200,000 now, perhaps. So Prabhupada's idea was we would bring the deities and we would build a temple. And somehow or other, this man got wind of it, and he got the police to come and arrest the devotees, destroy the structure. I don't know the details, but the details are not that essential to the story. But this story will start around the time the police were coming to arrest the devotees because they were illegally occupying. So So this man's name is Mr. Nair. Mr. Nair sold the juhu land twice, kept the money he had been given, tried to sell it again to Prabhupada, but Prabhupada refused to be cheated. Nair paid the police to destroy our temple. That was the temporary building, as far as I know. And they were smashing everything. Hare Krishna. Most of the devotees were already in the paddy wagon. In other words, the police came in, threw all the devotees in the paddy wagon and were destroying. I closed, so this devotee, Matahili, closed the deity doors. She was the pujari there. I closed the deity doors, put my back on the doors and said, no way. I guess maybe the police were trying to take the deities. Policemen came to me from all sides, started smashing the tube lights, and went for Tulsi Devi, who was in the middle of the temple room from the morning program. I don't know at what stage this, I've never heard this story before. Anyway, I went to get Tulsi. Then they grabbed me and started hitting me hard. I locked my arm around a pillar and they beat me hard on the elbow and the head. I had 2 long braids and they dragged me by one braid and one leg across the whole field with 1,000 people standing around watching. Not one person lifted a finger to help me. The police threw me face down into the paddy wagon and I was spitting. I guess just, we could imagine her state. Now listen to the next line. This is unbelievable. There is not one moment in my life that I have ever experienced Krishna consciousness except for these moments. Hare Krishna. I did not feel any pain. Not a thing. I had no other thought in my mind except Radha Rasa Bihari. Those are the deities of Juhu. That's the only blessing, true blessing I've ever had of all the practice, all the devotion, all the sadhana I've ever done. These few moments, I tell people, it's not me who saved the deities. That was the moment the deities saved me. For those moments, I was not in the world. The devotees described to Prabhupada how I was the last one to go and how I was kicking and screaming and biting and fighting. He said, quote, she'll go back to Godhead, kicking and screaming all the way also. The whole incident was a blessing. I didn't do anything special, but Krishna stole my heart at that moment. I've been trying to escape ever since, but I can't ever let go of Prabhupada, and he will never let go of me. Hare Krishna. I'll read the last part because it's a realization that I think will help us. On one level, I miss Prabhupada. On another level, I don't know what people are talking about when they speak about a living guru. In other words, a guru who's alive, because I still have a living guru. I can still hear his voice. You don't have to play a tape for me. I can still hear his comments. I feel connected to him. Actually, he won't let go of me. It's us who let go of him. We try to let go, but he doesn't let go. Prabhupada said, just do what I say. I shall never leave you. I shall never leave you. And he keeps his word. I was born to meet with Srila Prabhupada and serve him. Hare Krishna. So, no. Here's what Prabhupada called her. Let me read this paragraph. This is funny. In Juhu, Prabhupada used to distribute fruit from the evening offering, and he'd tease me about liking watermelon. He liked to pretend to give me watermelon and then switch to an orange piece and then see my face and switch back to watermelon. I was eccentric, and Prabhupada found me jolly. When we did Harinam, I would dance like crazy. Prabhupada called me the funny one. He'd say, put the funny one out in front. Prabhupada had another disciple he called the fat one. Go get the fat one. When we were with Prabhupada, we were encircled in a bubble of the spiritual world. So there was no misery. There were no three modes of material nature. You know, people say, what's it like to be with Prabhupada? It's difficult to answer the question. Say, well, have you ever been completely free from the modes of material nature? Have you been out of this world where there's no material influence? Well, that's what it was like. Prabhupada created that. And if you just walked in the bubble, then you were good. You didn't have to really do anything, just willingly be in the bubble and have faith and submission and appreciation of Prabhupada. And there you were in this transcendental bubble, and everything was there. Seriousness, funniness, happiness, distress, everything. But it was all transcendental. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. I know Mata Healy. She is eccentric. She was actually in San Francisco when I was there, 1970. Let me read something else she says. I never thought anybody could completely steal my heart, but Prabhupada did. I never thought I'd surrender to anybody, but I surrendered to him. He empowered me to do the things I did, to tolerate the austerities, like doing 6 aritis a day with boils under both arms. No matter what, I jumped to do anything he asked. So I'll tell a similar story. Some of you know about the Woodstock Festival in Poland. Woodstock Festival in Poland was modeled after the original Woodstock that I think took place in 1966 in a place called Woodstock, New York. And so it's a big, big rock concert. And the man who organizes it likes the devotees. And it's, I don't know, over thousands of acres, and people camp out, and they have different stages, at least 3 stages. And they gave the devotees 2 acres of land. And on that 2 acres of land, the devotees have booths and 2 stages and massive prasadam distribution. So I was with a devotee briefly for a few days who was a security guard at that festival. And it's a wild place. It's, you know, there's about 1 million young people and a lot of drugs. And at this festival, I don't think this happens now. I think that's been going on for 30 years. At this festival, there were some guys who were harassing some of the women. And so this security guard devotee, who is a martial artist and someone that you wouldn't want to fight, who's, one devotee said, his hands are registered as deadly weapons, like that level. Actually, I was with him in Washington, and we were driving to Vancouver, and they wouldn't let him in because as a security guard, I think he actually committed a lot of violence in his service and had, you know, he was never convicted, but there were records. So they wouldn't let him in. That's how I said, why didn't you get in? And then he told us why. I didn't know that. But anyway, he told us this story. So when he saw that, he went after, there was a group of men, I think it was planned out, and they were harassing devotees, especially the women. And he went after each of them. And I'm not sure what he did, if he knocked them out or he knocked them sufficiently that they were afraid to come back. But he single-handedly took care of all these rough, tough, big guys, big Polish guys. not only big guys, but Polish. And completely defended the whole event single-handedly. So as I remember it, it wasn't just like he went to one, then to another, just the next one, boom, boom, boom. And later on, they asked him, how did you do that? And he said, do what? He said, you knocked all these guys out. And he said, I did. He said, I don't remember. All I remember is seeing them and chanting Lord Nrsingadev. And that's all. And then that's all I remember. He did. It was like Lord Nrsingadev empowered him. And he didn't even remember what he did. And he did some superhuman feat. So it's nice to hear these stories because, you know, we read about these things, but it's nice to hear about them happening in our lives with devotees like ourselves. That Krishna consciousness is real. These things happen. Amazing things happen in Krishna service. Okay. So now we're ready. So I went through the spiritual bypassing document, and I didn't want to read everything that was left because I think it was would be a bit redundant. So I went through it and I picked out some things we can discuss. And this document was based on questions being asked of a Buddhist practitioner. And maybe when I read it, I'll kind of replace some words that will make sense to us. But it's interesting to read because within their Sangha, they're confronting the same problems we confront because their practice of Buddhism, although it's, you could say, atheistic or monistic or whatever you want to say, it's not personal. I mean, you can say they worship Buddha personally, but at least as far as the theological differences are concerned, mostly what is being discussed is how to be detached and not become inhuman in your detachment and be realistically detached. That's basically what he's discussing, and how that artificial detachment has played out in their Sangha in bad relationships amongst one another and in divorce, high levels of divorce, which I think is interesting, not only interesting, but important for us to understand, because we also have had high levels of divorce in our movement, some of which could be attributed to not processing the process of detachment properly, and not properly processing emotions, like human emotions that we're not supposed to feel, that we try to not feel. We try to not feel what we feel, and then that becomes a problem. So that's what he's talking about. So let's go. In light of the absolute truth, personal needs are insubstantial, something like a mirage, and fixating on them causes suffering. But at the same time, if a relative need arises, just shunting it aside can cause further problems. In terms of relative truth, being clear about where you stand and what you need is one of the most important principles of healthy communication and relationships. So this theme is going to be, we discussed this before, and this theme is going to be discussed. And so he's pointing out this where maybe the confusion comes is in the, you know, when we study our philosophy, we talk about how a pure devotee sees things and how he's not attached to this and that, and how this is temporary and it just causes suffering. And so we're understanding all these things. Yes, I'm going to die. Death is certain. It's not a big deal. We shouldn't be attached to anything in this world. It's all temporary, and et cetera, et cetera. And we became devotees because, yeah, this is what we've understood. It made sense. It was elaborated on in the Gita far more than we could have ever understood. And it all made sense intellectually, you know. So that's why Prabhupada said, women who become devotees, their brains grow. That was a joke, but You have to have some intellectual understanding of this. As if you're Indian, maybe because it's your culture, it's different. So maybe slightly different, but as a Westerner, you have to have that kind of intelligence. So the point is being made. On one hand, you understand all this. On the other hand, you're human and you don't feel all this. Have you noticed that? You understand it, but you don't feel it. So now what do? Do you pretend that you actually feel it? Do you deny that you don't feel it? Do you just not think about it? So that's kind of the dilemma that this conversation is dealing with. And he's saying that when you understand it, but you don't feel it, and you don't allow yourself to be human enough to acknowledge what you are feeling, well, I actually am feeling some attachment to what pure devotees are not attached to. I am feeling some attachment to things I shouldn't be attached to. Okay, so now what? What do you do about that? And so he's saying, if you deny it, it's going to cause problems, and they're going to show up in relationships. I mean, with yourself and with others. So what you feel and what you know are two different things. Right? I know this, but I don't feel it. So now we're going to talk about, well, how do you deal with that? I just wrote that down because I want to talk about it more on a video. You get all the classes summarized in 3 minutes on the videos. But someone smart like Tanya should watch the video and say, oh, we talked about it in this class. So we could put at the end of the video, for more information, go to this class. Maybe I should send you the videos. You want to do that? Try to do that? Because, if somebody's interested, it would be nice. They could go to the class. Okay, so let's read on. So I'm skipping a lot because I don't want to belabor this. I think we've talked about this a lot. I'm skipping into points that I think are powerful, relevant. I'm afraid that what many Western Buddhists, and we could say devotees and practitioners of Eastern philosophy, are practicing in the relational area is not non-attachment, but avoidance of attachment. Avoidance of attachment is not freedom from attachment. It's a form of attachment. Clinging to the denial of your human attachment needs out of distrust that love can be reliable. So avoidance of attachment needs is another form of attachment. That's interesting. So this also comes up in other areas. Sometimes you can be attached to not being attached to something you should be attached to because it's more comfortable not to be attached. This is more of a philosophical issue than a psychological one. But Prabhupada pointed out, and I was talking, if you heard the class last night, I was talking a little bit about this, that sometimes you can get attached to a spiritual practice that's not actually what your spiritual master wants you to do, or attached to doing too much of a spiritual practice to the point where it prevents you from doing something either by mentality or by time, what your spiritual master wants you to do, because you'd rather do this practice that he doesn't want you to do as much or at all, because he wants you to do some seva. So then you become attached to the detachment, because the spiritual practice could be an austerity, which seems to be a detachment, that I'm doing this because I'm detached. But you're not actually detached, you're attached to the austerity. If you were detached, you would follow the order of your spiritual master. And maybe you would have to do something or not do something you didn't want to not do or do. which doesn't look like detachment, but it's ultimate detachment, because the highest detachment is that you do what your guru wants. So that can happen also. What so he's using the word here, avoidance of attachment. I'm actually not detached, but I'm avoiding an object that I'm attached to. Well, in some sense, that's not a bad idea. You may have to do that, but he's saying it in a psychological sense where it's unhealthy, where you're denying some of your needs. That's his point. That, because you're beginning spiritual life as a more of in the bodily concept, and intellectually not in the bodily concept, but conditioned wise in the bodily concept. And because we have bodies and we're human, we have obvious needs. And then it's very common when you're young, a young devotee, to think, I don't have those needs, because those needs have maybe caused you frustration, and now you become a devotee and you just want to, like, okay, let's throw all this in the dustbin because it's just been problematic. And you try to throw it in the dustbin and pretend that you don't have those needs, but you do, and you're not addressing them, and then you become weird, for lack of a better word. Have you ever met a weird devotee before? If you know what I mean, you're like, it's like you're hungry and someone says you want something to eat. You don't know, I'm not hungry. You haven't eaten like in 24 hours. Should be hungry. No, devotees, they shouldn't be hungry. They should just be, transcendental, something like that, some crazy idea like that. So the principle is, you could state a principle, maybe it's not entirely true in every situation, but a general principle: nothing in itself is bad. It's only bad when it can't be engaged in Krishna service. So where he's going with this is that he's saying, okay, you're detached because you're denying your needs. That's how you're going to maintain your detachment. That's how you understand detachment. But when you deny your needs, what you're going to start to do, aside from getting weird yourself, is you are not going to be sympathetic to other people's needs, because you think needs are Maya. You shouldn't have any needs. You should be detached. Okay, maybe in theory, you shouldn't have any needs, but even when you are transcendental, you will have needs. You'll have needs for your disciples to follow your instructions. You'll have needs for your own sadhana. So it's not like needs go away. They may elevate beyond or become more refined. So he's saying, now we deny our needs, then we lose our sympathy for others' needs. And this weirdness that you are, when we're all weird, then the Sangha becomes weird. Then we have weirdness multiplied by the number of people, where everyone's in denial of their needs. And now we can't be sympathetic when others finally realize they have needs and emotions that they want to express, because we need to share in confidence. And so it's interesting how Rupa Goswami is saying sharing in confidence. So one thing we see when devotees share in confidence, often they share what's going on and their challenges and so forth. It's something that we've discussed that we all need to do. But if we pretend we don't have the challenges, how can you share them? Because you don't have them. You're not supposed to have them. Therefore, I don't have them. Okay, wait a minute. Let's go back and look at that equation. If you're Krishna conscious, you are supposed to be like this and not like this. And therefore, I'm a devotee, so I must be like this and not like this. Well, slow down. Yeah, eventually like this, but right now, more like this. So that's where this discussion is going. And that's why I think it's important. We could go on endlessly talking about how weird we are, but that's we don't have to talk about how weird we are that much. It's good to know how weird we are because there is weirdness about ourselves we're not yet aware of. So that's good. It's good to know it so we can do something about it. But, there is a point where it's like, okay, we need to talk about something else other than this. But so this is nice. He's taking it to the Sangha, how our own lack of awareness or our own non-detachment when we are attached can create problems in the Sangha, in relationships. Okay, so now he goes on to say, if your needs aren't going to be met, it's too painful to keep feeling them. It's better to turn away from them and develop a do-it-yourself, detached, compensatory identity, which means to compensate. So there's a tendency to use Buddhist ideas and say Gita ideas to justify dismissing the natural inclination to want bonding and attachment. I don't think that's such a problem with us because Sangha and relationships are so important that we would see something to this extreme as a problem. Oh, this devotee, he doesn't like to associate. What's wrong? We will naturally understand that. But maybe in Buddhism, they'll see, oh, he doesn't like to associate. He must be very detached. I'm not saying that wouldn't happen in ISKCON. It's less likely, which is good to know that their problems are probably greater because they're more focused on detachment than maybe positive service. So, but still, we can consider what he's saying. You can't fulfill, you think, well, these needs are not important, but I'm feeling them. So let's just shoot some Novocaine into how I feel so I don't have to feel them and I can just be detached. And if you get too detached, it can affect your relationships because then you won't need relationships, which we all need. Goes on to say, not needing anyone allows one to survive and manage in an emotional desert. But later on, the avoidant attachment has a hard time developing ties with others. So Krishna consciousness is all about attachment. So we have to be careful to not be overly focused on detachment, but it's better to be focused on attachment because detachment, I think in Buddhism, there's more of a focus on detachment. That's like one of the goals. But in Krishna consciousness, the focus is more on attachment because detachment comes as a byproduct, not as a main focus. Now you might say, but we have the 4 negative principles. And you are right, we do. And actually more than 4. But 4 we have to follow. So the idea is there has to be a platform of the 4 negative principles are a platform of a lifestyle which is sattvic. So you have to have a sattvic lifestyle. Otherwise, your brain will be too dull to understand anything. Because if your brain's in passion and ignorance, if your lifestyle's in passion and ignorance, your brain's in passion and ignorance, then you can't understand the philosophy. You'd be, as Prabhupada said, dull brain. A lot of dull brain people. Well, if you live in the mode of ignorance, your brain will be dull. Not that we weren't living that way. But so 4 negative principles is a sattvic lifestyle. Sattvic lifestyle enables you to practice Krishna consciousness and understand it. So that detachment, that discipline obviously has to be there, but ultimately it's fostered by the positive lifestyle. How can you follow the 4 principles steadily? By the positive, but you have to follow the 4 so the positive will be effective. So there is a starting point. Okay, do this. But most of us did it as a byproduct. Like a lot of us tried to follow the 4 principles and couldn't. We started chanting Hare Krishna and then we were following. So it always works that way. But our philosophy teaches us that the way it ultimately works is detachment as a byproduct of bhakti. So you follow 4 principles, so your bhakti will be effective. You're getting strength to follow from the bhakti, and ultimately it becomes natural to follow as a consequence of more elevated stages of Krishna, not even that elevated, but as following Krishna consciousness. So that's why I've said many times, and I'll say it again because it's important and it's a basic principle of our philosophy. Detachment can only genuinely take place as in proportion to your advancement in Krishna consciousness. And if you try to become more detached than you are advanced, it's going to be difficult to stabilize it. So, and then you might say, but I want to be detached from A, B, and C. Okay, that's good. But if you want to be attached from A, B, and C, then you have to work on elevating your Krishna consciousness, not just focusing on being detached. Although you may have to focus on it consciously just to draw the line so you don't step over that line into those activities. But ultimately, if you want to raise your tapasya or your detachment, you have to raise your Krishna consciousness. That's the way to do it. And so that's a safer position. And so then you don't become so weird. But if you focus on detachment too much, and especially as described here, if you focus on detachment by detaching from needs that you actually have to fulfill and that you can fulfill in a Krishna conscious way, or detaching from emotions that you have and not allowing yourself to be real about what you're feeling, and then not processing those feelings in a way that can help you advance in Krishna consciousness, then you're going to be in trouble. Then you're going to become truly weird. If you don't think you're weird enough already, that's the way to really be weird. You can get 5 stars for being weird. Hare Krishna. And, you know, I was joking and said, have you ever met a weird devotee? And some devotees are eccentric by nature. But sometimes you see that amongst younger devotees who want to be detached and are struggling how to do it. And they don't know what's going wrong because they're not as detached as they want to be or as they thought they would be by that time. So that weirdness tends to come at that stage, younger stages of trying to be detached by suppressing emotion, because then if I don't feel it, I'm not going to be inclined to it. And you could say sometimes in some situations, maybe that's helpful, but if it's a permanent way of living, it'll come and it'll bite you at some point. You can't permanently live that way without actually being elevated to a point where certain material emotions will not affect you anymore. You can't artificially pretend not to be affected. One thing that I've seen a lot, which is quite interesting to me, as a young devotee, I didn't think I was going to see this. Because many of us as young devotees, we moved into the temple. We didn't even tell our parents we moved. I didn't even know where we were. One devotee said he moved into the temple. He didn't contact his parents for 10 years. So we were hippies who were rejecting everything, and our parents were part of the everything. Not every devotee did that, but many did. Or there was a sense of, our parents are not devotees, and so, be detached, Battle of Kurukshetra, relatives, Arjuna has to fight, don't worry, you have to kill them, it's your duty, like that. So there was this sense that we're detached. And when Prabhupada is on the planet, it's very easy to be detached and excited about Krishna consciousness. So the phenomena I started seeing, of course, this is in recent years, maybe the last 10, this is the time when most of the devotees' parents have died in the last 10, 15 years, and maybe the next 5 years. Most devotees of my generation will lose their parents. I lost mine much earlier. My parents were older when I was born. So, and then a lot of devotees would say things like, I never thought I would feel this way when they left, but they were feeling deeply sorrowful and lamenting and so forth. and realizing how strong that attachment was, because they had, as young devotees, just wrote it off that I'm not detached. They weren't allowing themselves to feel it, because feeling it would just get in the way, they thought, of their spiritual advancement. So I thought that was interesting, that, many, many devotees I saw, they're not everyone, but a lot of them, their parents died and they were really affected by it. And he said, I never realized the emotional bond that I had with my mother until she died, or my father, whatever it was. So I think that that's an example of this. It was just, denied because that's what you're supposed to be detached. Again, being artificially detached is not detachment. And not being aware of what you need, as we said before, maybe the worst effect of that is that we become insensitive to others' needs. And one of the things that is so important in relationships and in working together with devotees is to be sensitive to how other devotees feel. Because if someone feels a certain way and you think, well, who cares how you feel? You're in Maya. You're in Maya, Tanya. Who cares how you feel? Why did you hear that? Thunderbolt hit my office. Just to add impact to that statement. That kind of idea, it's really, in a sense, autobiographical, because really what the person's saying is, well, why should I care what you feel? Because I don't care what I feel. And none of us should care what we feel. So, and if we all don't care what we feel, and thus don't care what other people feel, and are unaware of how we feel, then we have formed a bona fide cult. And welcome to the cult, Prabhus. You are in, and I don't know if you're ever going to get out. So, Hare Krishna. All right, we're having fun here, but there is truth to it, for sure. Yeah, okay, so let's see where this is going, this conversation. What happens in a Sangha community if the majority of people have an avoidant attachment style of relating? That's a question. Avoidant types tend to be dismissive of other people's needs because, guess what? They're dismissive of their own needs. My tried and true lousy internet is acting up. What happens is that people feel justified in not respecting each other's feelings and needs. Not surprisingly, need becomes a dirty word in many spiritual communities. You don't say what you want because you don't want to be seen as needy. You're trying to be non-attached. That is like an unripe fruit trying to detach itself prematurely from the branch and hurl itself to the ground. So yeah, same point. Detachment is, yeah. Oh, let's go back to this other idea of the difference between intellectualizing and experiencing. And what do you do when you understand this is the goal, but you don't have that level of realization to achieve it, or that level of detachment? Well, you don't get rid of the goal, that's for sure. The goal always remains. There's the goalpost. It's not going to move. But how you're going to get to the goalpost when you realize where you're at is going to change a little bit, because you thought you could get to the goalpost in 3 seconds. But when you're more aware, then you realize, no, it's going to be more than 3 seconds. And so you have a more realistic approach about what you're going to need to get to the goalpost. So the goalpost never moves. The philosophy, the teachings are always true. It's just how you're going to get there may change according to your awareness of what you need to get there, which doesn't have to be the same as another. And that's another pitfall. Well, he's doing it this way, therefore I should do it this way. Well, not necessarily. Maybe he could eat 50 gulab jamuns and be fine. And if you eat 50 gulab jamans, you will die. Actually, there was once a gulab jamun contest, and one devotee ate 50 gulab jamans. He didn't die, but he got close. I don't recommend this kind of competition. It was a competition. But we're all different. And so we get inspiration from other devotees. We need Sangha. We need that inspiration. When you see another devotee who's more advanced, it builds faith. This process works. Look at how advanced this devotee is. I'm inspired by this devotee. The pitfall is to think I should be as advanced as he should be when I'm not as qualified or as advanced as that person is. So the problem with that kind of comparison is that sometimes you may not be able to become inspired by that devotee. On the contrary, you become discouraged. Look how advanced he is, and look how advanced I am not. That's discouraging. As opposed to, this devotee is an inspiration. I want to be like him, and I'm not there yet. But, you know, the race is not over in 5 minutes. I have my whole life. Or Krishna will give me another life if I need. So that's a hard one. And many, many, many devotees deal with this, because especially when it becomes hard, is if that devotee has been a devotee about the same amount of time, in the same temple, with the same Sangha, everything the same, except they're like a rocket ship and you're like a turtle. Then you start to think, maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe even Krishna consciousness is not for me. Maybe I'm just a loser spiritually. That's when you run into trouble. So I never saw Srila Prabhupada say, what's wrong with you? Why don't you like this devotee? I never saw him do that. That would not be a good way to inspire someone. So we're all on the same path, but we're at different places on the path, and therefore different capabilities right now of what we can do. You know, if some of you try to chant 64 rounds right now, you could take off in your spiritual life. It could be amazing. And you would figure out how you'd get up at 2 o'clock and you would just chant till 10 a.m. and then get ready for your day. And some of you could actually do that. And others, if you tried to do that, might end up giving up Krishna consciousness in 2 weeks, or beating your head against the wall, or becoming depressed or suicidal, who knows? That could happen. Realistically, I'm not joking. Realistically, that could happen. Well, he's chanting 64, so should I. Yeah. And he's going up like a rocket, and you're digging a hole. You're digging your grave right now by doing it. So Prabhupada understood that. And if you see the way Prabhupada engaged devotees in the beginning of the movement, it was in full awareness of their capabilities. And it's nice if you have time to read letters, especially the early days, because you'll see how encouraging Prabhupada was. We needed encouragement desperately. And whatever Prabhupada found in us that he could complement or use to encourage us, he would, consistently. It wasn't a judgment, a comparison. It was just, yes, you did this sincerely. Keep doing that. That's beautiful. I'm very happy. So I think it's important to understand that Prabhupada did not deal with us that way. And as I've often said, we should not deal with ourselves in a way in which Prabhupada did not deal with us. What to speak of dealing with other devotees in a way Prabhupada did not deal with them. We should never deal with someone in a way which contradicts the way Prabhupada dealt with his disciples. Okay, so, okay. If the ethos of the spiritual organization leads to dismissing your feelings or relational needs, that means the need for relationships where you can open up and express what's going on inside, which oftentimes is not the good things, but the struggles. This can lead to big communication problems, to say the least. It's also not a great setup for a marriage if one or both partners is dismissive of emotional needs. So not surprising and this is a Buddhist organizations and marriages often turn out to be just as dysfunctional interpersonally as non-Buddhist ones. And I would go further to say that if you take two people who have wrongly learned that detachment means to artificially deny one's needs, to not feel what one is feeling, and then enter a marriage, I would say it would be more dysfunctional than your average marriage. Unless people who are marrying are feeling this way. But the point is that there's a tendency within spiritual practice, because we want to be detached, to deny emotion, maybe a stronger tendency than there would be outside of a spiritual practice. And then therefore, if you get two very good and detached devotees who have learned very well not to feel anything in their effort to be detached, to dismiss their own needs and emotions in detachment, then when they get married, they'll have no sympathy for one another's needs or emotions. And unless they're paramhamsas, it's probably not going to work. And if they were paramhamsas, they wouldn't get married in the first place. So for all of you non-paramhamsas who are going to be married, as I often warn you, don't marry someone who's too Krishna conscious. It could be dangerous. That's a joke, but there's truth to it. Because they could be dismissive of your needs as they are dismissive of their own. And it's possible they're so Krishna conscious that they don't actually have the same needs that you have, which is why I say, watch out. If they're too Krishna conscious, they won't even be able to relate to your needs. You need to eat. We ate 3 days ago. What's wrong with you? You need to sleep. We slept last week. So, Prabhupada loved not to sleep. He thought that was like the best thing that could ever happen. And when his digestion went out and he couldn't eat, he thought, well, what a blessing. I can't eat. I can't sleep. So we've actually seen this. I don't know if this is a thing of the past or it still happens in some countries, but we've actually seen these kind of inhumane treatments of other devotees. Someone's sick. Oh, Prabhu, you're not the body. Just get over it. Get up. Get up, do your service. Okay. I'm not saying this has happened every time in every case, but we've seen it sometimes. This misunderstanding comes. I mean, if you're not the body, what's the problem? Just keep going. But I'm dying, Prabhu. Cool. Back to Godhead. All right. Okay, that's the philosophy. But if your relationships become too philosophical, they become weird, don't you think? Oh, I got an accident. Just your karma, Prabhu. You probably deserve worse. Okay, that's the philosophy. It's true. But to relate that way is like, what? You don't feel that I'm like in pain right now? You're not the body. Who cares? Do you think devotees actually acted that way in the past or even now? Sometimes, yes. Because they had philosophy and no feeling, and that makes you weird, don't you think? We could make a movie, right? Of all these devotees who have no feelings and they're only philosophical, kind of like robots. There was actually a movie. There was actually a book like that, where there was a society that was created. It was, I think, genetically created, anyway, a society was created where people didn't feel anything because they thought all the problems in the world are because we feel hatred and envy and so forth. So if we don't feel that, we can create an environment where everything is controlled. And they had to take injections every morning. And it was demanded of them. They take injections every morning, and that would annihilate their feelings. It was quite an interesting book. It's called The Giver. My wife said she read the book when she was like in high school or something. She said, "This is my favorite book ever." So now imagine a society where there's no feelings. I mean, if you're having trouble understanding everything I said so far, this should make it easy. Imagine a society in which nobody feels anything. And of course, Krishna says, in this story, there's one person who embodies emotion. He knows everything in the past. And so they keep one person because when they need to solve problems, they need someone who's got past experience. And in order to remember the past, he doesn't take the injection. So he knows what all the emotions are. And so they don't have the emotion of love. If you say love, nobody knows what that is. They have no idea what it is. And Krishna is saying, offer me with love. So could you imagine a society in which people had no emotion? Then you understand, actually, bhakti is all about emotion. It's about affection. It's about attachment to other devotees. These words are used in Bhagavatam. You should be attached to devotees. Offer me with love, devotion. There's all this emotional language. It's just in relation to Krishna and in relation to devotees. It's an interesting thought. A society without emotion. What would that be like? And now when you think of that, you think, do you know any new devotees who are trying to deny their emotion? And then you really understand how bad that is, right? I also find that what's happening in our movement is there is a lot of emotion going on underneath that can't be expressed out of fear, as we were discussing here, out of fear that they may be devalued, misjudged, maybe even asked to leave the temple if they live in the temple. So that's not healthy either. It has to be a place where we can express what we're feeling without being judged. I may be feeling something that I know it's not what I should be feeling, but I'm feeling it and I need to talk about it, right? So that's important. Otherwise, we become a cult, bona fide. Hare Krishna. I don't want you to read novels or watch movies, but that storyline, The Giver, is very interesting. Of a society without emotion. Wow. It's nice. I think it's good to meditate on it. If you see any symptoms in your Sangha like that, you could think, oh, this is not good. So the whole question is, how can you exhibit emotion in relation to Krishna? Okay, we're having kirtan. Sing with devotion. No, sing, but don't feel anything. You can sing, but you can't feel anything. You're a sannyasi. They said to Lord Chaitanya, you're a sannyasi. Why are you singing and dancing? Sannyasis don't do that. So this is Mayavad. Don't feel anything. So what Prabhupada said, all that austerity makes your hard heart. And eventually you will feel, you will desire, and you won't be able to maintain that. Even if you're this exalted Mayavad renunciate, it doesn't work. Doesn't work for them, certainly doesn't work. They're not going to work for anybody else because they're very evolved. Now here's the thought process has gone to now we're talking about community. Then it went to one-on-one relationships, either in marriage or working together one-on-one, of how if we're artificially detached, we're not sympathetic to one another's needs, then it really shows up in marriages. And here's a further elaboration, which I thought was interesting. Most of us don't get as triggered anywhere in our lives as much as in intimate relationships. So if we use spiritual bypassing to avoid facing our relational wounds, we're missing out on a tremendous area of practice. Anyone who's married knows this, like close, not even marriage, but close relationships, they trigger us. Relational practice helps us develop compassion, quote unquote, in the trenches where our wounds are most activated. So, like, I can give an example of myself. I don't know if I developed this or it's just how I was born, but I always like figuring things out, how to do it myself. Someone said, do it this way. I said, I'll figure it out. Not entirely like that, but that's part of me. So this funny thing happened when I got lost. I very rarely get lost, but I got lost once and I drove like 80 miles out of the way. It was late at night. I was tired in a part of the country I'd never been, and the roads were confusing. And as a bona fide man, I checked the map, but I just kept driving thinking maybe this is the wrong way. And I didn't check the map again. And then I hit the main thoroughfare, but I was like 80 miles north when I should have been like 100 miles south by that time. So then I thought, okay, surrender to the GPS. So I got the GPS, got it working, and the GPS started telling me where to go. And my initial reaction was, don't tell me what to do. Now, I'm serious. Like, I don't like people telling me what to do. I didn't even like the GPS telling me what to do. Could you imagine? I'm okay with GPSs now. Don't worry, I got over it. But my initial reaction was, don't tell me what to do. Sometimes my wife might tell me you should do it this way. And so there's a trigger. I don't like it. And so I recognize it. I work on it. I'm much better now, but it comes up in relationships and things are being triggered, which is not the fault of the other person. It's just us, right? You all have triggers, right? For better or for worse. Relational practice helps us develop compassion in the trenches where our wounds are most activated. Beyond compassion, we also need to develop attunement, the ability to see and feel what another person is going through, what we could call accurate empathy. So we talked about that. Now here's an interesting, I'm personally interested in helping devotees in relationships, because if we don't get relationships down, we have bad marriages, which can have such a bad effect on our spiritual life. We have bad Sangha, which is it's bad for us, and it's holding the movement back on what it can do, because the better the Sangha, the better relationships, the more inspired we'll be, the more inspired people will be to come to our Sangha because they see the good relationships, the more positive energy it produces, and the more Krishna blesses us. But the real issue here, as I see it, or maybe not the only real issue, but one of the real issues is the children. Prabhupada had great faith in the next generation of children. He liked us, but he said, your children will be better and their children will be better, because you're getting your purity wearing off on your children, their purity wearing off on their children. So he said, your grandchildren will be the first generation of pure devotees. That's how he saw it, right? Now, we never realized something because we were young, in that in order for a devotee who has descended and taken birth in a devotee family to continue their spiritual life, in order for them to grow spiritually, they need an ideal material environment. We didn't think that way. We just thought they're evolving spiritually. So wherever you put them, they will grow. Kind of like a weed, just it'll grow anywhere. So we saw that this did not happen in many, 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 many cases. And we learned the hard way. And what we're seeing now, we have a generation of lots and lots and lots of really, really good devotees born in devotee families because they had very healthy, stable, materially stable environments, which means they had two parents that weren't carrying knives and trying to kill one another, if you know what I mean. Everything was stable, was peaceful. The parents were good devotees. They got along well. They work on themselves. They don't, through disciplic succession, give all their dysfunctions to their kids. So their kids grow up neurotic, psychotic, schizophrenic, whatever, traumatized. But the kids grow up in a very healthy, loving environment. And so there's no impediment to their spiritual life. This is what bothers me personally when I see parents and I look at them and they say, we're getting married. And I go, they're getting married? But you have so many problems. Like, how are you even going to stay in the marriage? What to speak of be a stable mother or father and an example. So when I say you should work on yourself and be healthy before you get married, I'm not just thinking about your relationship. I'm thinking more about your kids, that you're going to call in these kids who are coming to further their spiritual life. You want to give them every opportunity in a materially balanced, stable environment. So if we develop problems because of artificial detachment or whatever, it's just going to carry over on the kids. Weird parents create weird kids, generally, not always. Sometimes weird parents get cured by their kids who aren't weird. That can happen also. But you understand what I'm saying. All right. Getting carried away here. I didn't go to your questions. Okay. We have 15 minutes, so let's see what you have to say about all this. Yeah, there's the document, but I'm skipping around. I've met the weird devotee. We have met the weird devotees, and the weird devotees are us. Sydney has consigned herself to be a turtle. Now she's happy being a turtle. Turtles are okay. At least they're moving. Samira says, people who are suppressing emotions often feel they are like time bombs. They can explode at any time. Yeah, of course. Yeah. With those people, if they're your friends, ask them to talk so then they don't have to explode. Or they can explode on you before they explode on everyone else. And the longer you hold it, the more you'll explode. This is what they call in marriage counseling dirty dishes. The dirty dishes is when you get in a fight with your spouse and you're talking about one thing and you bring up 400 things from the past. Those are the dirty dishes because you held them all in and then they all come out. They're like, what are you talking about? I thought we were talking about this. No, but you didn't do this and this and that and this. Yeah. That's exactly. Samira says, where's the line between healthy and unhealthy behavior when it comes to suppressing emotions? And how do we recognize when it becomes an unhealthy habit? So suppressing emotion, if you're not suppressing emotion, doesn't mean you're acting it out. Like you might be angry and you recognize you're angry. You're not pretending you're not angry. And that anger, if you allow yourself to experience it, it has some intelligence to guide you how to deal with it. That's the point. So we can look at emotion and feeling as two different things in the sense. One thing is the anger and one thing is how I deal with it and process it. So we can call that feeling. The emotion is anger, but what am I going to do with it? So don't be afraid of your emotion, but let your emotion guide you. So if you if you allow yourself to not act out on your anger, but to allow yourself to experience it, to know what's causing it, then you could do something. Like, why am I angry? You're not going to know if you keep suppressing it. That's the point. From Nadia Mani. Without emotions, is this from Kadamakananda Swami quote? Without emotions, we cannot develop love for Krishna and living entities. Yeah. Krishna says himself, if you offer leaf fruit, devotion, I will accept it. Priti Purvakam. Sometimes it feels like a lot of obsession over conspiracy theories in the devotee community boils down to repressed emotions of frustrations that have finally found their way out. That's interesting. Yes. They're after you, Nadia. The GBC are after you, Nadia. They're going to come to your house one day, steal your Bhagavad Gita. Hare Krishna. That's whose comment? Nadia's? That's Nadia's comment? No, whose comment was that? That was Tanya's comment. All right. Forgive me, Nadia, for assuming such things about you. Okay. That's Tanya's comment. The GBC are coming to Tanya's house tonight at midnight to steal her Bhagavad Gita and eat her pakoras. Watch out. I always knew there was conspiracy up there. In case you don't know, the GBC is composed of devotees just like us, like people who are been around a while and have shown themselves as good devotees and trying to help Prabhupada. Okay, so we can read a little more. We have 10 minutes. This answers one of the questions. It presupposes that everything we experience, even the worst things, have its own intelligence. So if you allow yourself to, the only way you're going to understand this answer is if you have some emotion, don't act it out, but allow yourself to feel that emotion and see if it gives you some intelligence about how to deal with it. If we meet our experience fully and directly, we can begin to uncover that intelligence. There's some intelligence the emotion carries and distinguish it from distorted ways in which it manifests. Like I think the simplest example, if you get angry about something, I think often when we get angry, we wonder, why am I getting angry? What's going on here? I shouldn't be angry. So this kind of questioning becomes more easily answered when we allow ourselves to just feel the anger, not act it out, but feel it. And we start getting some guidance or guilt. Why do I feel guilty? What did I do wrong? I must have done something wrong. I feel guilty. So guilt has its own intelligence. Shame. What am I ashamed of? Why am I feeling shame? Should I be feeling this? Is this right? Or is this awkward that I'm feeling shame when I shouldn't be? Could be true of guilt also. Maybe I just have a guilty conscience. Or maybe I actually did something wrong. I don't want to face it. If we meet our experience fully and directly, we can begin to uncover that intelligence and distinguish it from distorted ways in which it manifests. For example, if we go deeply into the experience of ego inflation, we may find a more genuine impulse at its core. That's it's a wounded way of trying to proclaim our goodness, to remind ourselves and affirm that we're basically good. Like, have you ever acted out of ego and questioned why? Why did I do that? Why do I need that recognition? Why do I need to be right? And then you face it and you start to delve into that question. My wife always says that whatever we're doing is trying to fulfill a need, but let's say it comes out as ego, pride, it's just an unhealthy way of fulfilling it. I want to be recognized. So what's an unhealthy way of being recognized? Go blow up a building. You'll be recognized real quickly. You'll be on the front page of every newspaper if the building's important enough. So that's coming out of ego. I want to be recognized, quite an unhealthy way. And then, all right, what's a healthy way to become recognized? Do some amazing seva to help millions of people read Prabhupada's books. You'll be recognized for that also, but at least that's a healthier way to fulfill that need to want to be. You'll be recognized too by all the people that got the books. They'll go, thank you for giving me this book. So you'll get recognition, but it's in a healthier way. At the heart of all the darkness of human feelings and experiences, there is a seed of intelligence, which, when revealed, can point in the direction of freedom. You track the process of present experiencing, following it closely and seeing where it leads. And you unpack the beliefs, identities, and feelings that are subconscious or implicit in what you're experiencing. When we bring awareness to our experience in this way, it's like unraveling a tangled ball of yarn. Different knots are gradually revealed and untangled one by one. As a result, we find that we're able to be present in places where we've been absent or disconnected from our experience. So the point is that sometimes we don't want to experience what we're experiencing because it's not pleasant, or it reveals weakness, or it reveals contamination. So we'd rather just avoid it and pretend it's not there, but that's not the process of bhakti. That's what in bhakti is called duplicity, that you're in one place with one experience, but you're denying that and pretending you're something better. In some cases, even pretending you're something worse. So that's not bhakti. It's not healthy. So sooner or later, at some point, it's hard to acknowledge sometimes the pain, the suffering, the weakness, the anartha, the reality of who we are. But I would just call that humility. And it's from humility that we can really make progress, because pride is a bit of a denial act, because you can be proud as long as you deny your failings and weaknesses. It's hard to be proud when you're really aware of them. And of course, we're not supposed to be proud. So then being connected with who we are, and then being able to accept that reality, that's called humility. And when you become humble, it's actually the greatest feeling. Pride is not a great feeling. Pride is an artificial form. It's a temporary form of sense gratification. You can feel good about yourself for a while, but no matter how great you feel about yourself artificially, you still are who you are. You can't eventually hide from that. And you'll have to come back to that. But if you can come back to that, acknowledge it, be okay with it, and say, okay, this is what I'm dealing with, and I know what the goal is, then that's humility. And so we could say, if we wanted to sum all of this up, we could say that you can't really allow yourself to experience these difficult emotions in a healthy way unless you're humble, because you'll tend to deny them or rationalize them. Yeah, I feel this way, but it's because of him. It wasn't for him, I would be a pure devotee. It's all his fault. So that doesn't help either. But to be realistic, I feel this way because this is how I feel. And what is this telling me? What is it teaching me? What can I learn from this? And it's the reality right now. Doesn't change the goal. The goal's still there. I'm still working for it. But what does it tell me? What can I learn from it? And as we said, what's so important about it is that it makes you that you become such good association for others. A lot of times devotees will come to me and they're embarrassed because they did something stupid or misunderstood something or forgot something. And so they'll tell me and they say, I feel really embarrassed to tell you that I did this or that. And then I say, okay, so what do you want to do about it? And we discuss it. And often they say, I was surprised that you weren't upset. And they'll even ask, why weren't you upset? And I said, because I did the same thing myself when I was your age. So it's hard for me to get upset when someone is making the same mistake I made. Or sometimes knowing it's inevitable that you'll make that mistake at this level of Krishna consciousness. That just goes, So I think that's helpful in relationships if we can acknowledge our own mistakes. And then when we're dealing with others' mistakes, it's a lot easier to tolerate. Okay. So Mahatma Das II has arrived just in time. And our class has officially ended. So we can, so I guess, Anuradha, you're going to make Ormani the host, and then we can officially end.
I think she already is the host.
Oh, wow. She has mystic power. Become the host.
Please accept my humble praises, Gurudev. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, I'm going to stop.